All right. Howdy, howdy, folks. Welcome to the third such debate I have had with one of the people in my community. If you want to debate with me as well, I have a Discord linked in the YouTube, as well as a Patreon if you want to support me more monetarily. Today's topic is abortion, I believe, in light of the Roe v. Wade decision. And I will turn it over to my guest, who his position is pro-life, and I'll let you explain what is the finer points of your position.
I don't believe pro-choicers can warrant being pro-choice, and I think that until that can be warranted, that the default position should be pro-life to some extent. I think that being pro-choice without a warrant is irrational, and I think the possible destruction of value should be prevented or at least avoided until we can discuss what value actually is. So that would be my position in a summary.
Okay. Without a warrant, what does that mean?
Well, what is the justification for being pro-choice as it relates to the value of the fetus?
Well, the thing about pro-choice is that it's about the choice of the woman. If they don't want to use their body to foster or grow a child, then they should have the choice to opt out of that procedure. And while the loss of the potential life of a fetus is tragic, the life of that fetus does not outweigh the bodily autonomy of the woman.
So why does a woman get to use her bodily autonomy to end the life of another?
Because the life of the other, the fetus, could not survive without the body of the woman. And the woman has full and complete control of their body. So if they opt out of growing that child, then that child is done for.
So because the fetus is dependent on the mother, the fetus doesn't have equal or equivalent moral value?
Oh, no, it can have equal and equivalent full moral value. I remember a really good analogy is if you had a full-grown adult, right? Two full-grown adults, and that person needed what was it called, a blood transfusion because their kidneys aren't working, and you got hooked up to this person, and their blood is being cycled through your kidneys to make sure that they don't die. At any point, they are a full-grown adult. They have equal moral value and weight as to you. But if you decide to unplug yourself from that machine, that is the metaphor for pro-choice. You can choose at any point to unplug yourself from that machine, and that may result in their death. But still,
I think this
bodily autonomy.
I think this logical parallel fails, but I also am somewhat confused on why you would emphasize the dependency of the fetus and then simultaneously say that its dependency doesn't matter as a value claim. That doesn't make much sense to me. If it sounds like this, the scenario that you're talking about doesn't require that you specify that it be independent or dependent. So when you specify that it's dependent, it kind of does sound like you're making some form of prescription. But regardless of that, I don't think the logical parallel necessarily works. I think that you are excluding the idea of how this dependency comes about. The state of dependency that the fetus is in is the result of the actions of another person. And there is some aspect of liability that exists when you put a person in a state of dependency. Not many of them are physically reliant, which is why abortion is kind of niche in that kind of sense. But the aspect of you being responsible for the dependent state that you put someone else in is something that we do as a society all the time. It's what insurance is by definition. Insurance is legally required because if you were to harm somebody else, medically or physically, or maybe their property, if you consider property to be an extension of the individual, so like car insurance and house insurance and such, if you were to destroy such a thing, or hurt them or put them into a state of dependency, that's why you have insurance. To some extent, we've kind of exchanged the physical autonomy part of responsibility to the financial aspect of it. So someone else can fix that person's house, or someone else can pay that person's medical bills.
Except not all people with a uterus chose to have a baby. There's instances of rape that they clearly didn't choose that.
Sure. So if hypothetically I said to you abortion in cases of proven rape is justified, would you agree that abortion is not justified in other circumstances that are not the result of rape?
No, no, I agree
So,
with abortion in all circumstances. Did you
so why
know
did you
that?
bring up rape?
Did you know that the majority of abortions happen in the first 14 weeks of pregnancy, and then after that, abortions really only happen if it's threatening the life of a mother?
Why would that change my opinion at all?
A lot of people tend to make a difference between early and late stage abortions. You know, a lot of
Who does?
Christians that I've met, they'll harp really hard on late stage abortions, but those are really
Well,
an extreme rarity.
no, we harp on late stage abortions because we make a logical parallel between what the difference is between a fetus in the womb and outside of the womb, and the most comparable thing is late stage abortion to a baby outside of the womb. But I don't think that the I don't think that distinguishing this matters to me. I don't view 29 weeks any different in value than 1 week. So I don't particularly care what point they're actually taking part in because any point is wrong. But or unjustified, I'll say. And back to the question of this is that you bring up the example of rape as a kind of well, as a justification for, well, not everybody is necessarily responsible for the state of dependency. And then I ask you, okay, well, what about people that are that are consensually doing this, consensually putting someone in a state of dependency, and you still support abortion for them? So I think it's kind of disingenuous to use the backs of minorities and victim groups as a justification for something on a universal level that isn't parallel at all.
Well,
But
hold on. The fact that they're getting an abortion kind of indicates the fact that they didn't want a child. Someone can have sex and not want a child, hence the abortion, hence the
yes, but
early term abortion.
but the consequences of your action are that. Like that is consequential, isn't this like
So
point?
your position is you want to punish people for having sex by saddling them with a child?
I think that you use words with negative connotations to depict arguments as being immoral. I don't think punishment is the correct word. I wouldn't describe my argument as being punishment. I would simply state that what we are trying to describe is to what extent are you responsible for the thing in the womb, and to what amount can you inflict anything upon it. And I don't think your bodily autonomy is justified to to harm the fetus in that way, especially when its state of dependency is your responsibility. It is a consequence of your actions, and in some cases consensual, right? So yeah, no, that let's try to avoid using words with negative connotations. It's not what I'm claiming at all. Okay.
Okay. I still don't think
So
you've gotten over the bodily autonomy argument. At any point,
well,
someone can
what's
choose.
the
At
why?
any point, someone can choose to revoke their the access to their body, the nutrients,
That's
the things
that's
the
not true.
fetus needs to live. They can say,
That's not true.
"Sorry, I don't wish to engage in this anymore. I'm pulling out of
No.
the deal," and they can get an abortion, have the child
Mm.
or the fetus removed,
I don't
and be
agree.
done with it.
No, I don't agree.
Why not?
Because I don't believe you can revoke consent in fatal manners. It's like the equivalent of inviting someone to a helicopter just to revoke the consent for them to be inside of it and kicking them out. That is not a proper justification of revoking consent. So the standard that we have to have is revoking consent in a fatal manner, knowing you're going to do so at some point is unjustified. Just like I couldn't invite you in my house and then revoke consent and then shoot you. Me putting you in a state of dependency or me consenting to you using my bodily autonomy, knowing that you will be put into a state of dependency and then revoking that consent is equivalent to that of murder. That's an unjustified action. I mean, if you want to follow this to the fullest extent, like let's reduce this to as much as you possibly can. Someone could hypothetically invite you on a boat, let's say, and then revoke their consent for you to use their let's put it like this. Actually, I'll go a little bit deeper into it. If someone was to invite you onto a boat, right, and you invite them onto a boat, and basically they're on this boat, and someone, the boat owner, wants to revoke their consent that that person's on the boat, would it then become justified to throw them off of the boat?
It wouldn't be a great thing, but we're
Well,
talking
no. Would
about
it be?
bodily
Well, no.
autonomy.
Would it?
This is a
Well, I mean, it's bodily autonomy. The individual with the boat would have to go back to shore to drop the person off, would they not?
Yeah, but
Okay, so
we can take
fantastic.
this
So
back to my,
there's an oh
the
well,
blood transfusion argument. If you're literally hooked up to another person, even a full fledged adult, and they will die if you unplug from the machine, at any point you have the
this is
bodily autonomy
this
to unplug
the
from the
logic.
machine,
Listen,
even if they die.
the logical parallel fails because you're not taking into account the fact that an individual's consent was given in some circumstances to put a person into a state of dependency. And then furthermore, I would also say that my logical parallel using the boat is better. I think that you are making um, a false distinction. Well, it's not a justified one between the differences in physical bodily integrity, the autonomy of one's physical body, and and the autonomy of action. So, for example, you say, well, it's not a issue of bodily autonomy if someone is forced to bring someone to shore. Well, absolutely it is. It requires that a person stops what they're doing and commits action to bring a person back to the shore. So the boat analogy is actually quite well. It's bodily autonomy in the sense that it's an action. And I don't think that there's a difference in value between the bodily autonomy as blood and organs and that of action. So yeah, I don't think this distinction is made well. I'm sorry.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion.
Well, no, I mean you have to warrant why there's a separation between or a difference in value between the bodily integrity of your physical body and that of all the actions that you commit. Why is it separate that I take your blood? Or why does that have more moral grounding than me forcing you into a box, or forcing you into a
Let me
cage?
try a different angle on this. Someone can consent to sex, and then even though they didn't want a child, they end up impregnated and they have a fetus. Upon learning this, they understand the severe hardships, both physical and mental and financial, that being pregnant and giving birth can incur.
Uh-huh.
And they do not want to go through all of that. They are perhaps not financially stable enough, or they do not want to go through the physical trauma of pregnancy, because that can be really hard on a body.
Uh-huh.
And they decide, I want to opt out of this before
Well,
the fetus has really even formed into a person.
okay.
Guys, I know you're religious. I grew up in a religious church, and the Bible teaches that life is becomes at first breath. So, if someone wants to opt out of a pregnancy before that, then they can avoid all of the financial and physical trauma that comes along with the
My my
pregnancy.
my
They
my
might
my my
make a
position isn't
responsible decision.
negligible.
They might make a responsible decision to be like, I am not prepared to be a parent to a child, so I'm going to opt out of this and I'm going to terminate the pregnancy.
Okay. Okay. Listen, my position is not a religious one, first and foremost. So I'm just gonna
Okay.
put that out. I don't think that it's a justification, the financial hardships or some amount of the suffering. I don't think that that's a justified means of removing the pregnancy. Um, I don't think that either of those things affect the validity of the fetus's value, and I don't think either of those are a justification to remove it necessarily. I cannot kill an individual for financial hardship, and there's no justification for that. The value of the fetus doesn't change whether or not the mother wants or doesn't want the fetus. So I kind of find it hard to understand why someone would
Except
believe
they
that
don't want to let their body run the course of bringing a pregnancy to term.
that isn't a justification to kill somebody.
It is their body.
The fetus is not their body.
No, but the fetus will die without their body, and if they
Okay,
want to
so you
remove
think
the
that you
fetus,
think you think that you think that the dependency of the fetus is a justification
let
that
me
it
put
should
it
be
this
allowed to be
way:
removed.
if we could remove the fetus and it could be grown in some sort of test tube outside the body, then I'd be in favor of that over like the state mandating that someone carry a pregnancy to term.
Well, this doesn't see the issue with what you're saying currently is that what if that procedure, in order to do so, was more difficult or more hazardous or more harmful to the mother? Let's say physical pain, it wouldn't kill her. But let's
Right.
say the process of removing that fetus and putting it into a vat so that it would grow was more uncomfortable than that of an abortion, would you support abortion still, or would you agree that banning abortion in those scenarios would be wrong? Because it kind of sounds like you want a justification to preserve the fetus's life, but you're holding on to this idea that we have to make these procedures as comfortable as possible. And I think I'd like to put very
It's not
quickly that.
about comfort. It's about bodily autonomy. If someone doesn't want to
Good,
use
so
their body
fantastic.
to foster a child,
So hypothetically speaking, if there is a process to put the fetus into a vat, then you would still have to agree that abortion would be justified because it's bodily autonomy, right?
if someone doesn't want to participate, then yeah, they can
So
remove their bodily autonomy.
why would you even make the distinction between putting in a vat and not? It's like
I said that
you
putting
can.
them in a vat, or finding some other incubator for the fetus would be preferable to its termination. But I still hold firm to the bodily autonomy of the parent, that they can
Okay,
say, I don't want to use my body to bring a pregnancy
to
to
what
term.
extent is that bodily autonomy? I don't agree that this falls under the justification of bodily autonomy. You're putting someone into a state of dependency knowingly the majority of the time, and I don't believe that's a justification to remove them. And you have yet to respond to these parallels where I said the parallel between the giving the blood or the transfusion, or as you called it, it isn't parallel. It isn't an actual parallel. It's very similar to the violinist argument, and it's not a very good
It is
argument
the
because the state
violinist
of dependence.
argument.
Yeah, the violinist argues. You're correct. So the state of dependency isn't very good. The state of dependency is the result of your action, and that isn't included in the violinist argument. It's why it's not parallel. So when you take in consideration a parallel that takes in part consent, there doesn't seem to be a justification. Well, you say, well, yeah, you said, well, it's an aspect of bodily autonomy to bring the person back to shore, but it isn't the same as giving up your physical body like blood.
Wait,
And I
hang
say,
on.
well,
Let
what?
me turn that on you, because you keep harping on the consent thing. Would you then agree that abortions in instances of rape where consent was not given are justified?
No.
Okay, then don't bring up the consent thing.
Well, it's not. It's not turning around. Your idea is that okay. It's. I'm not bringing up the consent thing. I'm just explaining to you why your logical parallel is wrong, and the reason it's different is because of consent. My idea isn't that revoking consent is a universal argument, because obviously it doesn't encompass things like rape. That isn't my claim. But I just like why your logical parallel isn't a parallel at all. So when you have instances like the boat parallel, where an individual can be thrown off of a boat and bodily autonomy must be used to bring that person back to shore, and then you have instances like someone's hooked up to a blood transfusion, um, I don't see what the distinguishable difference is in value between the bodily integrity of your actions, sorry, bodily autonomy of your actions, and the bodily integrity of your body. I think both are aspects of autonomy. Your property, the actions that you must do, like if you're bounded by law or bounded by morals or bounded by justification to commit an action, well, that's not an infringement of bodily autonomy because it's justified. Because I would say infringements are unjustified, but that is an aspect of bodily autonomy that you must in some way give up. And if you're basically put into a situation where you have to give a blood transfusion or take care of a fetus in your body. This is also an example of in which bodily autonomy, to some extent, has to be curbed for the preservation of a life that you put into a state of dependency. So unless you can make a distinction between what the difference in value is between physical body and the bodily autonomy of action, then I don't think that saying the boat parallel is not a parallel is valid. And then I would say that we must continue with the logical parallel of the boat to reach its logical conclusion, which is that revoking consent in a fatal manner is unjustified.
Except for, even in your scenario, if someone was forced onto the boat against their consent, would you consider jumping off the boat, or choosing to jump off the boat, the bodily autonomy of the person who was forced onto the boat? Do you think the person who has been forced onto the boat against their will has the right to jump off of it? Or do you think they should wait
Does
and
the
wait to
let
be
me, let me
driven
let
to
me make sure I
shore?
understand. Let me make sure I understand. Does yo one sec, my bad. I know that. Yo, come on, not my bad, not you guys. What the fuck is his name? Eric, not Eric. Oh man, fuck, Eric and Oh fuck! What the fuck is that guy's name? Oh, bro, I saw my buddy. I forgot his fucking name. Is his name Eric? No, his name's. Oh man. Oh man. That sucks, bro. My bad. You're asking me, do you believe that? My bad. Let me recite here. I just saw someone I haven't seen in like a year.
That's all right.
Um,
Let me run that by you one more time then.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so mine is bringing in the metaphor of rape. If someone is taken onto the boat against their will, do they have the right to jump off the boat at any point, or must they wait until the boat comes back to shore?
If I choose to go onto your boat, you are asking me, do I have the right to get off that boat?
Yes, but also I was talking about if you were forced onto the boat.
So if I was forced onto the boat, like someone pushed me onto the boat,
yes,
do I have a right to leave that boat?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
What do you mean, there you go?
That's abortion. You choose to leave the boat. You choose.
The fetus isn't choosing to leave the boat.
No, but the mother is choosing to leave the pregnancy.
That's like the captain throwing you off the boat. That's not the parallel you just gave. You just asked me if I was forced onto a boat, and this would be synonymous with the fetus. If a fetus is forced into a mother, does the fetus have a right to leave the boat? Does a person have a right to leave something they are forced into? If they can choose to do so, yes. This isn't parallel to the captain throwing you off the boat. Abortion is the captain throwing you off the boat. Because if I asked you if the fetus was choosing that, well, the fetus doesn't abort itself, right? So if the fetus is the dependent person in the logical parallel, they don't choose to hop off the boat. In fact, if we want to take this parallel, like if you actually want to keep this parallel, I'm perfectly fine with that.
We're torturing this metaphor a little bit.
Well, no, we're not taking. You're giving me a logical parallel. I'm saying the parallel you gave me would be like, does the fetus have a right to choose to get off the boat? If the fetus could make decisions, yes, I guess the fetus would have that right. But it isn't the fetus that's choosing to leave the womb, because you know what? If the mother didn't abort it, the fetus would grow and then pop out and leave like natural process way. So like no, like the procedure of putting like a giant saw into a woman's vagina and cutting up the baby is not the person who's forced onto the boat. That's the captain's decision. So I'm not really sure what you're going.
That's not how abortions work, bud. I don't know who you've been listening to, but during the first couple of weeks of pregnancy, it's just a cluster of goopy cells, and they stick a little vacuum in there and zoop it up.
Yeah, still unjustified, but still, you understand the parallel, correct?
Yeah, I understand the parallel.
Okay, good. So, would you like to try that again?
All right, let's run this one more time. If someone becomes pregnant and they do not want to carry the pregnancy to full term, it is their bodily autonomy to opt out of the pregnancy at any point. Typically, this is done within the first 14 weeks of pregnancy. Why
is this? Pregnant. I understand. Why is this justified? Don't just say bodily autonomy, because that becomes circular. Why is it justified for a woman to revoke consent?
They have ultimate control over they should have ultimate control over their own body, sovereignty of their own being.
Okay, that's really poetic. But why is it justified to revoke consent? And why don't you follow this parallel in any other scenario?
I have followed it twice now.
No, what? Sure, fantastic. So if I was to invite you onto a boat and decide that I don't want to take you back to shore, am I allowed to throw you into the ocean?
I don't think the boat metaphor quite matches up with pregnancy.
Why? Because you think that there's a separation between the physical autonomy of a person's body and the physical autonomy of a person's action?
I do think there is something sacred about the body versus not the body.
I think that's quite ridiculous, because that puts value on the physical aspects of your autonomy and not the physical ones that require action. So you think that, for example, and we can do this, you're kind of creating this like hierarchy of value where you say that, okay, well, me taking blood from you, that is more immoral or that is less justified than me surrounding you in a metal box and preventing you from going anywhere? Why? What is the distinction there? Like, is it because your physical body holds more value than that of your action? Well, how could that be true? Because it requires, your physical body is what permits you to commit action. So that doesn't make much sense to me. If I restrict your access to commit an action versus I take a physical part of you away, both of which are bodily autonomy, but one is restricting the access you have to commit action, and one is taking an aspect of integrity. I don't see a discernible difference between the two. I think that your right to choose. Really quickly,
All right.
I think that your right to choose to donate blood is on the same level as your right to physically go anywhere you want. So, with that being said, if I was to take that away from you, right? If I was to say that it's unjustified for you to revoke the consent of your body, your physical body, and then I was to say it is unjustified to revoke the consent of action, right? Like me, like throwing you off of the boat versus taking you home, right? Both are on par. So unless you can make a distinction between the two, the logical parallel is perfectly fine. And if the logical parallel is perfectly fine, then we can agree that revoking consent, where a person is in a state of dependency that they agree upon, then it becomes unjustified to have an abortion.
Let me answer this by returning to the violinist argument. If I need a blood transfusion and you were hooked up to keep me alive, if you at any point chose to unplug yourself from the machine, you would be justified in doing so.
No.
It's
I don't agree.
your bodily autonomy. If you
That's
don't
awesome.
want to,
If I hypothetically, if me and you hypothetically talked about it beforehand, and I said, "Hey, random guy, I want you to put yourself into a state of dependency. I will take care of you until a certain point, and we agree upon this, and you do so, and I do so, and then 5 minutes later, after you're in a state of dependency, I decide that I don't want to go through with it anymore, so I unplug myself and instantly kill you. How could that possibly be justified? This is the equivalent of, hey, me and you agree to go into a boat. We go out into the middle of the ocean, and I agree that after a certain point in time, I'm going to take you back to shore. But halfway through the boat trip, I decide that I never want to go back to shore, and I don't even want to put up with you anymore. So I'm going to throw you into the ocean and kill you instantly. How is this justified? Like, to what extent can you revoke consent in a fatal manner? Because that would mean I can just throw you out of, like, Uber drivers can just throw you out of the car going 70 and kill you instantly. Why do they have to take you to your destination? Why can't they just revoke consent?
Well, Uber drivers can do that, actually. That's a really good metaphor.
Well, no.
Uber drivers can stop at any point in their side and said, "Get out of the car. I'm done taking you on as a passenger."
Pause. They have to stop, correct?
Yeah, they stop and kick you out of the car.
Why can't they just kick you out of the car while they're going 70?
That would be reckless endangerment. They can stop at any point and say, "All right, I do not want to continue with your patronage. Get out of my car."
I understand. Okay, you're not following the logical parallel. If they are required to stop at some point so that you survive in any fashion when they revoke their consent, then it is no longer parallel to abortion. Now, if you want to stay with this Uber analogy, we can do so. I agree with you that a Uber driver should be required to stop at a certain point or time so that the passenger can safely leave the vehicle, because although they're revoking their consent, they're not allowed to revoke their consent in a way that throws you out going 70 and kills you. This is kind of synonymous with saying...
So we're back to the test tube baby argument.
Allow me to... Okay, well, you see where it's going. That's good. So it should be a requirement then that if a mother is to revoke her consent, that she must do so only at certain points. And the point that is justified is when the fetus can survive on its own. So I agree with this. If a mother was to, let's say, want to not go through with pregnancy anymore, then I believe she has the right to wait until 6 months and then remove it from her body. But just like an Uber driver doesn't have the right to throw...
The problem is that we're forcing women for 6 months to carry a child that they don't want.
That's good.
That's really hard on the body.
I mean, we can pull... okay, well, let's stop using the word force because it's an agreement, right? This is a negative connotation. We're going to avoid using words like that. How about I put it in positive connotation so you can see how one-sided it can be. Yeah, Uber drivers should be, quotations, forced to not throw their passengers out going 70. Does that sound like the proper terminology? No, it doesn't. Uber drivers should be required to commit to their actions and understand that they cannot revoke consent in a fatal manner. So Uber drivers should not be allowed to kill people. See, that is how I can put it in my favor. But you understand the analogy. We can agree that it is justified to remove a fetus if it doesn't die, right? But we can also agree that just like an Uber driver cannot throw you out of the car going 70, it isn't justified to remove a person that you've consented into a state of dependency upon. It's
Except
just,
all the Uber driver need to do to kick you out of the car is stop driving.
well, that's an aspect of their autonomy that they have to do. I mean, we can do any scenario. You can, for example, we can take a plane. We can do a plane. Are airlines allowed to throw you out? Well, they have to wait a period of time. I think it becomes semantical to start putting limits on what time. Like, what time is unjustified? If I consent, if me and you consent to putting you into a state of dependency, what amount of time does it become justified or unjustified? And how do you warrant that? It becomes semantical. The issue with the time thing is that it has nothing really to do with time. It has to do with autonomy. That's their whole argument, right? So just like an Uber driver has to stop the car, stop what they're doing, and stop where they're going, that's an obstruction of bodily autonomy under your framework. A helicopter driver or a plane a pilot would have to land the plane. That's an obstruction of everyone's autonomy in a sense. And just like me inviting you into a boat or me putting you into a state of dependency, me having to go through and wait a couple months, or me having to go back to shore, is still an obstruction of my bodily autonomy. And this reverts back to, if you cannot separate the difference between the bodily autonomy of one's physical body and that of their actions, what they're capable of doing, if there's no discernible difference in value, then the amount of time, the semantical amount of time that it takes to ensure that someone doesn't die from revoking consent that you agreed upon, it's not a proper argument. That doesn't solve any problem. So we've come to the point where it's not justified to remove that person in an unconsensual manner, and it's not justified to remove that person if you consented to it, because it would be a fatal means of removal, and that's not justified, which is why you should have to wait until a certain particular point, just like someone would have to wait to fly or drive or stop or any other manner. So yes, no, I think time is a semantical aspect of it. I don't think that you can justify why 5 months is any more unreasonable than 10 hours, right?
I think there's a pretty healthy distinction between 10 hours and 5 months.
I think the justification of why they're different doesn't exist. I just think you think one's longer, so you think it's more justified, but neither of them are justified. Like, throwing you out because it's going to take 10 hours and killing you when I agreed you should be in my car, and throwing you out because I don't want to drive you anymore after 5 months and killing you, both are unreasonable. Like, you can agree that we can't, throw people out of Ubers or out of boats.
Because a woman waiting like a week or two to like schedule an appointment for an abortion versus waiting 6 months to get the baby removed.
Neither are justified. Oh no, well, one is justified if you remove it in non-fatal means. Yes, both are justified in the sense that there's no distinction in value between the amount of time. Like, there's no intervals that have more value than others. You just don't like the fact that you have to wait a long time. But
Yeah,
any
because that's
individual,
really hard on a human body, and that's a long
that's
fucking
awesome.
time.
That's awesome. I can say that it's an obstruction of anyone's bodily integrity to not be able to revoke consent. That doesn't matter. If an individual agrees upon a state of dependency, they are not justified in removing that state of dependency or removing that consent or revoking that consent to kill that person. That's not a justification. The time frame doesn't justify it. If I agree that you should be allowed onto a cruise ship and the cruise ship consents to putting you into a state of dependency, they cannot throw you off of the boat when you start acting up. Now, they can stop somewhere, but if they're in the middle of the ocean, they can't do so. We can use parallels like this all the time. The issue is that time doesn't really matter. So you have to justify why someone can revoke consent in a fatal means. If you agree that people shouldn't be allowed to do that in everyday instances like helicopter rides, boats, cruise ships, and cars, or even medical procedures, then why is it justified for someone to revoke consent in a way like that? It just doesn't become justified to me.
Bodily autonomy is the thing we hold higher than everything else. Because
No,
it
you
is
might
the
hold it
most
higher than
personal
that.
and the most
No,
intimate form of
that
autonomy.
meant nothing to me. No, that meant nothing to me. That isn't the claim. No one. Even if I was to agree with the standard, that wouldn't change the fact that you can't revoke consent, because it's an infringement on someone's bodily autonomy to revoke consent. That's what it is by definition. So, like, for example, like if I decide that I no longer want to have consensual sex with you, and then revoke it in the sense where I just want to do something else now, like you revoking consent and then doing something that's unjustified isn't an aspect of bodily autonomy. The bodily autonomy that you're infringing upon that point is the person that you're breaking the consent with, not the person who consented. Like you are placing the value of consent, or you're placing the value of this discussion on the person who is capable of committing action. Like the person who is in the state of dependency is having their bodily autonomy infringed upon because they're put into a state of dependency that they might have agreed to, but now is being revoked. Like, that is an infringement of their autonomy. Like, when I revoke consent and do something to you that you did not agree to, I am infringing upon your autonomy. The infringement isn't on the person who is doing the action. Like if I agree to take you to a
The
helicopter
fetus's
and I
autonomy does not what's the word
outweigh
outweigh or owe them the nutrients and the body and the bodily functions of the
you
parent.
you
It
have
does not entitle. That's the word I was looking for. It does not entitle them to the
if
bodily
a mother
functions of the
if someone is
of the
put in,
parent.
if someone is put into a state of dependency, then yes, they are entitled to do so. Just like if you were to put someone into a physical or medical state of dependency, you are entitled to take care of them. Right now, like I said before, in the very earliest part of this discussion, we have basically transferred the means to do so into a different way. So, like, if I was to break both your legs, I don't necessarily have to take care of you, but I financially have to. That's what insurance is. So we've transferred the responsibility from a physical one, like me having to physically take care of you in your house, to me having to basically pay for you to have care providers. Like, so yes, you're absolutely entitled to do so. If I put you into a state of dependency unconsensually, then absolutely you're entitled to that. If you reject this, then you don't believe people should have health insurance. Like, this is like the logical conclusion. Why would you need health insurance? If I hit you with a car, why should I have to have health insurance? I have no responsibility to take care of you. Even if I put that person into a state of dependency without their consent, why should I have to take care of you? Well, because you have a responsibility to do so. Like, you agree with this, right? This is what health insurance is. If you don't agree with this, then you have no basis for believing in health insurance. And you also have no basis, like, we're going to revert back to the original parallel because I think you're avoiding it. You also have no, let's say, responsibility to commit to things you consent to. So I can fatally remove consent. Like, this is and I don't. This is just to kind of add like a key point. Well, not really a key point, but to add a kind of a comment. I find it kind of interesting how, the party of progressives, like you describe yourself as a progressive person, can possibly believe that it's progressive to be able to revoke consent in a fatal manner, and then simultaneously believe that responsibility isn't something that exists. It just doesn't seem like a very progressive thing. I don't think that progressive societies or utopian, even if you have like a utopian ideal, I don't think it's ideal to rip apart things and then revoke consent and then kill people and then simultaneously believe that you don't need health insurance. Like, none of that is progressive. But if you follow your logic to its absurdity, like, that is the conclusion we must draw.
Falling into a bit of emotional language of ripping up and killing people there.
Well, I mean, when it's late term, of course it is, and you believe it's justified regardless. So,
yeah. Topic.
all right, would you like to stay if I blend you up with a tool and suck you out with a straw? Because that's really what it is. Like, the process becomes
late term
justified.
abortions are
And
almost always
actually,
done
what's interesting?
they pose a health risk to the mother.
You say that it's a use of emotional language, but if they did hypothetically cut them up with a pair of baby scissors, you believe it'd still be justified. So I don't think you should be. If they did hypothetically, you would support it.
Late term abortions are almost always done for the health of the mother because it's going to kill her if they don't.
Awesome.
Most, and I mean over 90% of abortions happen within the first 14 weeks of a pregnancy.
You agree with abortions regardless.
Well, I think they shouldn't be restricted by the state, yeah. Because I don't believe that the state should force people to give birth.
They're not forcing people to give birth. You're making you legally liable to revoking consent. That's what it means. Like, you are not justified in revoking your consent in a fatal manner. I cannot
Banning an
remove
abortion is
my
absolutely forced birth. That is the position
consent.
of anti-abortionists.
I don't care about the rhetoric. It's not necessarily forced birth. Abortion is justified in medically necessary cases. So it's not about forced birth. There's no standard that I'm holding where everything has to be born always. The standard I am holding is it is unjustified to revoke consent when something is put into a state of dependency by your agreement. By your actions, by the consequence of your actions, there is an individual who is put into a state of dependency. You would like to remove that. I do not believe that revoking consent in a fatal manner is
And
justified.
again, you're harping on the
Therefore,
agreement thing again, but what about in cases of rape? Would you
awesome.
believe that abortions are justified then?
Let's say I said yes. Would you agree that they're unjustified when it's not cases of rape?
No.
Okay, fantastic.
It's
So
bodily
we can
autonomy.
just okay. I love individual pro-choicers that, basically just throw up bodily autonomy anytime. Like, you are not someone who clearly understands bodily autonomy. There's no justification that is bodily autonomy.
Yes, it is.
You are having your bodily autonomy infringed upon if someone revokes their agreement to you and kills you. Like that's
If the baby
you can throw
cannot
up bodily.
survive outside the mother, and the mother chooses to revoke the use of their body for growing, then that baby's gonna die.
Yes,
They get
like
the little vacuumed out of the uterus.
yeah. So let me
tossed.
give you a parallel. If I choose not to feed my child, it will die. That is basically what you just said. How is this an argument? Yes, this is true. If you neglect,
If they choose
you're
not to
responsible.
use their own body to incubate a fetus.
Yes, it will die. What is this what argument is this? If I neglect to basically take care of something, it will die. This is not an argument. Is this a value claim? Are you trying to say that because the fetus is dependent, it doesn't have as much value as the mother?
No, I'm saying because it's
But then what is it?
it's
Okay,
the
fantastic. So
parent's body.
if this isn't a value claim, then the only thing you are currently saying to me is things that are dependent will die when independent things don't take care of them. Yes, this is what dependency means by definition. All you are doing is reiterating what it means to be physically dependent.
I feel like you've walked backwards into the bodily autonomy argument. Yes,
No.
if someone who the fetus is dependent on the parent, and that parent chooses to revoke the use of their body to incubate the fetus, then that fetus is going to die. And that right is held by the parent.
That's not right. That's not right. No, we'll put it like this. You understand that you're not even making an argument. You are just
that is the argument. I've laid it out plain as day.
That's not an argument. There's no claim there. All you've done is restate what it means to be dependent. You are basically just saying things that are dependent will die if someone chooses not to take care of them.
And they should have the right to choose that.
Why should they have the right to do so?
Because that's their body.
No, it's not. The thing that the bodily autonomy that is being infringed upon is the one where they were responsible for taking care of it but are not doing so. That is what is being infringed upon. No one is infringing upon your bodily autonomy when you are liable to the responsibility that you put someone into a state of dependency. That is like saying that the captain's bodily autonomy is being infringed upon when they throw a person off of the boat and kill them. That doesn't make any sense.
The fetus is not entitled to the parent's body.
Who is breaking the responsibility? Is it the captain or the person who got forced onto the boat?
I care about autonomy, not responsibility here.
No, that is what autonomy is. If you can agree, this is what I'm trying to say. There is no autonomy that is being infringed upon. What you are saying is parallel.
Autonomy. You want
that
to
is
force
their
mothers
autonomy
to
is
give
not
birth.
you have a false understanding of what bodily autonomy is because you are nothing more than a pro-choicer who throws up the words autonomy every single time they're backed into a corner. If I agree with you that you should be a passenger in my helicopter, and because of that you are now in a dependent state, and I can justify this because you're a dependent state, because if I choose to crash it or not land it or not take you home, you will die. I have agreed to put you into a dependent state. Or maybe you didn't agree so. Maybe I put you into a dependent state. It doesn't really matter regardless. But if I put you in my helicopter and we fly into the sky, which one of our bodily autonomies is being infringed upon? The person who is throwing the person out of the helicopter and they die, or the person who is getting thrown out of the helicopter even though they're only in there because you put them in there? Whose bodily autonomy is being infringed upon? Because you are under the impression that bodily autonomy is being infringed upon when someone revokes consent. The person who is revoking consent isn't the one who's getting infringed upon. It's the person who they're revoking consent on. Because if they agree to be put into a state of dependency and then you revoke that and kill them, then they're getting infringed upon. It doesn't make any sense to defend the person who's killing somebody. It doesn't make any sense. If I throw you off of my boat, even though I put you on there and agreed to take you home, I am killing you. If I put you into a state of dependency that you do not agree upon and I throw you off of the boat, I am infringing upon
that
your
I
rights.
gave the violinist argument at the very beginning of this, and the first thing you did was move away from the bodily autonomy argument to the action to the
That is the bottom. No, this is the bottom. This is what you're not understanding. Consent and responsibility are aspects of bodily autonomy. If I consent to something, I am agreeing to some extent to, I don't know, use some amount of my bodily autonomy to commit an action. So if I agree to drive you somewhere, right, I am using an aspect of my bodily autonomy to get you there. Because if I decide that I don't want to do that anymore, well, then that's something that's also a choice. So, for example, if I decide that I'm not going to move my car, that's an aspect of bodily autonomy. Not doing and not going through of an action is the same thing as going through as an action. Both not and doing something are aspects of bodily autonomy. So if you were to hypothetically agree to drive someone somewhere and then revoke that consent and throw them out of the car and kill them instantly, that is not justified because you have agreed to use some amount of your autonomy to put someone to a state of dependency and get them to a location. That is why it's not justified to throw someone off of a boat that you agree to take out. That doesn't make any sense. So when you say an infringement is happening, just know the infringement isn't on the person who owns the boat or driving the car or on the mother. The infringement that is happening is the person who is put into a state of dependency by your decision, and then you choose not to commit to responsibility.
Again, you're bringing up the consent thing. Do I need to go back to the rapist argument? You keep bringing up the consent thing. I will hammer this on you ad nauseum.
You use victim groups as a justification for your belief system on a universal level. It is disgusting and it is wrong. Rape is not a justification for abortion where someone agrees to it. So to use this group as a kind of like
it is a glaring flaw in your argument.
It is not a glaring flaw in my argument. I am not using autonomy as a universal gatekeeper. You are, however. So when you use the backs of minority groups that are victims to justify your universal worldview that abortion is justified universally, then you are riding on the backs of victims. Why can you not just concede that even if abortion is justified in the cases of rape, you using rape as a justification for universal abortion is apparently wrong? And if you agree that it is wrong to do so, then you would stop bringing up that minority group every single time someone challenges your belief on consensual pregnancy.
It is entirely justified for someone to abort a fetus that happened because of rape.
Stop using victims as your justification for a point that no one is arguing. We are talking about consensual pregnancy.
Stop arguing for forcing women to give birth.
If you want to talk about rape, I will gladly allow you to concede that the rape argument has nothing to do with consensual pregnancy, and we can talk about rape. But until you concede that you are bringing up rape as a what is it called, a black card? What is it called? When you pull a card like as your kind of like as your wild card, let's say that's the term I was using. If you can agree that you are pulling up rape as a wild card because you know it doesn't fit either mine or your argument, then I will gladly talk about it.
No, but it hammers your argument to pieces. You're talking constantly about you choose to get into the boat, you choose to get into the car, you choose to get into the helicopter.
All you were doing is going, hey, all you're doing is going, hey, there's a small percentage where people don't choose. That justifies abortion for people who choose and don't choose. No, it doesn't. It justifies abortion for people who don't choose, because that is the only people that argument applies to.
It
So
means we
stop using
shouldn't
you are
legalize forced births.
you are using the backs of victims for your argument on a universal level. If you can agree that even if rape was hypothetically justified to have an abortion, if you can agree that rape is a justification to have abortion, then I can be fine with that, so long as you agree that that does not justify consensual pregnancy. But you're not willing to do so.
The point of that is to point out that even under your justifications, abortions can be justified under some circumstances.
Only
then
if
we're just
you make
haggling under.
only if you make the distinction that only unconsensual pregnancy is justified. The issue is we are debating about consensual pregnancy.
The point there is that we're just haggling over when and the how. I
No,
argue
it's not.
that it's justified at all times, and I'm arguing that you can justify it during certain times. Then we're just haggling over degrees.
No, you are not following the argumentation correctly. I am claiming that consensual pregnancies are unjustified in having abortions. All you are basically going is, what about unconsensual pregnancies? That is not my argument. If I can prove to you, or you cannot warrant, that consensual pregnancies are justified in having abortions, then you must.
Justified. I think we've beat that horse dead into the ground. So let's shift a little bit.
No, they're not. Wait, pause. They're not justified just because you bring up examples of non-consensual pregnancy. Like, that does not make any sense. Those are two totally different things. That was not the argument I made. Then stop when every single time. No, that is the argument you made, because you say you want. This is what you said verbatim. Oh, you want to talk about consent? What about unconsensual cases? You are using victim groups of rape for your argument on a universal scale. How about you just concede that there's no justification for consensual pregnancies, and I am perfectly willing to have a discussion.
Bodily autonomy. We've circled this drain like a dozen times now. You don't seem to get it every time.
Wait, pause. Listen, how could you possibly, don't just take, clear your head for a second. Just literally don't think of anything to say really quickly. How could you possibly believe that you are in a position where we've created anything circular? The only reason we are doing something circular is not because you have justified your opinion. It is because you have just repeated the words bodily autonomy.
We've gone around in the same circle multiple times.
You have not. No. This is where you're fundamentally flawed. You only think this because you repeat the same thing every 5 minutes when you don't understand something. Have you justified the distinction between physical bodily autonomy and your actions? No, you have not. Have you made a distinction between who is being infringed upon, the person who is
killing? I have made the distinction between actions and bodily autonomy.
What is the distinction between them in value?
Bodily autonomy is held higher because that's your own personal being. That's as intimate as it gets. You can't go deeper than the bodily autonomy argument. How
does your physical body, like your skin cell, have more moral value than your autonomy to do action?
I'm not talking skin cells. I'm just talking your body.
If I chain you to a wall and restrict you from committing any action in your interest, versus I remove a percentage of nutrients from your body, how could you justify that one is worse than the other? Because if you say so, then you are placing physical value on the physical body more than what your physical body is capable of doing. Like, you are placing more value on the cells that make up your body than the actions your body are allowed to do. And that doesn't make any sense to me. If I throw you in prison unjustifiably versus I remove a pint of blood from you, how could you justify which one is worse than the other? If you're not capable of making that distinction without basically just going, well, one is your body. Yes, we're aware one of your body.
One but both is of them are closer. One is more intimate. One gets as close to you as possible.
Neither of them are more intimate than another. I would actually kind of argue that one is more intimate. It's the one I chain you to a wall. Because if I remove a pint of blood from your body, I am not restricting you to, I don't know, let's say, not walk around. I'm not restricting you to not go places you want to go. Are you saying that? Are you claiming that pregnant women can't go places? No, of course not. But if I tell you that you are forced to drive me somewhere That's a pretty hefty fucking responsibility. That's a pretty hefty restriction on bodily autonomy. So if I chain you to a wall versus over a span of time I take something from you and you can do whatever you want in that period of time, how could you possibly say one is a bigger restriction? That doesn't make any sense to me. If I put a gun to your head and I say you are responsible for taking me somewhere versus I take something from you over time, but you're capable of doing or saying or going anywhere you want, how could you possibly justify that as a difference? What is the difference in value? Is it because it's your physical body? Or
Yeah,
is it because one is
because
more
it's your
okay?
physical body that's
Okay,
being invaded,
fantastic.
that's
Okay,
being
that's awesome.
used.
So this is the misconception. If I prevent you from going places, it's also a restriction on your physical body.
It's a restriction
If
on your
I,
movement,
if I,
yes. But
no,
there's also something especially
it's a
intimate
restriction
about
on
your
body.
own body
It's a
being
restriction
used
on,
without
no,
your
it is a
consent.
restriction.
Because
Okay,
you've
this is
implicitly implied this entire time that it
it is a
doesn't matter
restriction.
about the parents' consent in the matter. All that matters is the fetuses. That
No,
the
that's not
parent
how.
can go
No,
fuck
that's not.
themselves once they have
That is
once
not.
they've been
That is not.
impregnated. They are
That was
forced to carry it to
you.
term.
You are mischaracterizing the claim. I will repeat. If you're trying to, all you're trying to tell me is what I'm claiming. I'll tell
All
you
right,
what I'm claiming.
final 5 minutes. Give your closing argument.
Let's put it like this. You and pro-choicers are not capable of warranting why an individual should be able to revoke consent in an evictionist matter. Even the evictionist can't do it, and you can't do so either because it becomes unjustified to do so. Furthermore, sorry, this girl is in a wheelchair. I'm trying to figure out if I need to help her because she looks a little lost. Um, I don't know where she's going. I hope she's okay. Um, basically it becomes unjustified to do so. If you cannot justify what the distinction is between your physical body and what your physical body is capable of doing, if you cannot describe to me why there is more value on your body versus what you're allowed to do as a physical human being, then I don't believe you can make the distinction. It is because of that that you cannot say that the logical parallel of the boat is unjustified. If you cannot justify why the logical parallel of the boat is unjustified, then we can continue to use it. If we can agree that throwing you out of an Uber, even though you consented to take
Hello? Hello? Bud, you cut out.
hello,
Oh, hey, you're back.
can you hear me? What was
Yeah,
the
I
last
can
thing you
hear
heard?
something about you made it to the Uber driver.
Yes, if we can agree that revoking consent in a fatal manner is unjustified, and we can agree that you cannot make a distinction, a valuable distinction, in the physical body versus what you're capable of doing, I think that's synonymous. But then there's no justification to be found. It's not justified to be pro-choice in any sense. The infringement then is placed upon the thing that is getting infringed upon is the person who is having their bodily autonomy taken away, and that is the person who is put into a state of dependency that is getting thrown out the door, essentially. That is an infringement. I cannot believe that an individual would believe that the infringement is on the person who is killing somebody versus the person who is being killed. That is absurd. I don't think that making any distinction like that is possible, and that's why I don't believe it's warrantable to be pro-choice. And that wasn't even a value discussion, and that's one thing too. If we were to have this discussion on value, on the physical value of the fetus, it becomes even less discernible. I don't believe you can do so. There's no way to justify, at least what I understand. I've not seen a justification for removing the fetus as it relates to the fetal value. So, yeah, that
All
is the
right,
claim.
that's your closing argument.
Maybe next time you can warrant it a little bit more. But yeah,
All right, thank you for coming on. I'm gonna close out here, and I'll make my closing arguments and give my final thoughts.
all right,
You can
adios.
probably expect this to be posted this Monday, given the relevance of the Roe v. Wade decision, and I'll just push our last discussion on theism to next week.
Okay, all right, bye.
All right, see ya. Good Lord. Okay, my closing argument. I think I substantiated all of my claims fairly. Multiple times he'd ask me to make a distinction on something. I'd make it the distinction on something, and then he'd say he wouldn't understand, or he'd say that it didn't make sense, and then he'd just move on as if I hadn't made that distinction multiple times. He would bring up how, oh, I can't make a distinction between the autonomy of the body versus the autonomy of action, and I would point out that the autonomy of the body is the most intimate. That's the closest autonomy you can get. That is second only to like crawling inside your own brain. That is as intimate as autonomy can get. Over and over. Man, I'm really sad we ran out of time to do the legal argument. I kind of wanted to get into that with him, but we didn't have enough time. We were just kind of circling the same autonomy argument over and over. I will admit the boat argument kind of had me stumped for a little bit as I was trying to work out. I thought the violinist argument would suffice, but he moved away from the violinist argument so quickly. I think he was expecting me to make that argument and was trying to construct an argument that would trip up the violinist argument as much as possible. But I think I brought it back around when I brought it back to the violinist argument and pointed out that at any point, yes, you could revoke consent. And then I made the distinction between the bodily autonomy and the autonomy of action argument. It is a little bit annoying how every once in a while he'll go, "Oh, you just don't understand. You're a libtard who doesn't understand. You're a progressive who just..." Over and over, as to sort of try and argue like some sort of legitimacy on his part. Mr. PhD of arguments haver, I guess. I wish he'd just make the arguments instead of like trying to insult my position in making arguments. He shied away from the punishment aspect, but over and over, he would make the argument of like how all of the attention and autonomy should be focused on the fetus and not the mother, and that the mother should be forced to carry out a pregnancy to, in his mind, at least 6 months or beyond that, which, any way you slice it, that is a punishment to the parent for having a child. And to any AFAB people who might have been listening, I was trying to make the conscious choice to say parent and not mother, to sort of de-genderify the conversation, but I slipped up a few times, so I apologize for that. A lot of the language around pregnancy sort of drifts into gendered language, and I'm not perfect. But damn, I wonder what our next conversation is going to be on. If any of you are wondering, at the beginning I did say this was the third such debate. It's the third that we've recorded. If you want to debate with me, head over to the Discord, which is also linked in the YouTube. If you want to support me monetarily, as I upload these debates exclusively on YouTube, not on TikTok, head over to Patreon, where you can support me financially. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, where you'll get these videos exclusively. And yeah, I think this is gonna be the second debate uploaded, third one recorded. And that's gonna be really interesting. Oh man, I'm trying to think of any further final thoughts on that entire debate, because I didn't feel like we made any ground. I felt like him and I were just spinning our wheels the entire time. I don't know. Maybe I should start interrupting people more to dig into their arguments the second they make a bad argument. But I tend to prefer to let someone talk long enough to lay out their entire argument, and then I can pick apart on a single point and build my argument from there. As that's the sort of style I much prefer. It gets a little bit annoying when I'm doing that, and then they just like start throwing out insults like partway through. He did that in the last debate, which I guess you guys will see next week from now. Like in multiple times in the debate, he'll go, "You're a libtard, you don't understand." And then I got fed up with one of his arguments, and I called the argument he was making retarded, and he feigned surprise. He's like, "Oh, so progressive of you." And I'm like, don't feign progressivism now. It's just like he did the same thing with the fucking the rape thing. When I brought up the flaw in his argument, that he kept harping on and on about how if you consent to put someone in a state of dependency, and then I pointed out flaw in that argument. Hey, what if someone didn't consent to put someone in a state of dependency? And then he kept running away from that argument. He kept It's like, oh, he tried to feign progressivism. You're using the backs of minorities to your advantage, and it's like, I don't believe that you give a flying shit about that. The fact that you think that people should be forced to carry pregnancy to term tells me that you don't really give a shit about their autonomy being violated via rape, and it feels really disingenuous to sort of take up a defense of them and act indignant that I'm pointing out a flaw in your argument, being what about the autonomy or the consent given at the very beginning of your argument? And he's trying to dismiss that as it's a major criticism of his belief system, and he doesn't want that addressed. So he's like, "Oh, you're just using people who've been raped to your advantage," and sort of tries to argument of incredulity away my criticism. And yeah, I think that's my final thoughts on the debate. I'm gonna have to watch it back, but thank God the fucking audio should be recording much better this time. I tested it last night and it was working perfectly, so nothing should have changed between then and now. And I'll ask you all, what do you think of the debate? An hour and 5 minutes. Man, we got these timed perfectly. And I'll see you all in the next video. I'm going to be making smaller videos in the in-between, and then I'm going to try and have debates uploaded on Mondays weekly. So I'll see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.